The US dollar's role as the de facto global reserve currency is looking increasingly uncertain. That's according to MarketWatch, who's accurately reflecting sentiment from investors around the world who are dumping US dollars and sending currencies like the Swiss franc to a 14-year high, even buying Japanese yen. Today, I'm going to tell you how to profit from a falling dollar and how to protect yourself. Now, I've been telling you for years, you want to be diversified. I left the US, I gave up citizenship, I closed money in my accounts there, and I've increasingly moved a lot of my money not only out of the US, but out of US dollars and into other currencies. Not long after I started Nomad Capitalist back in 2012, we had the peak of this emerging markets boom. Since then, markets like the US have outperformed. But now analysts said emerging markets are back, and the dollar and the US are increasingly in peril. Now, I understand you could buy Bitcoin or you could buy gold. Certainly that can be part of your diversification strategy. Whether you keep Bitcoin on a physical device or you keep gold physically, I would suggest physically keeping some of that offshore in a private vault, so it's not just sitting waiting for your government to take it. But let's assume you want some fiat currency exposure. I'm going to talk to you about what various analysts are suggesting. We're going to go through cash options, equity options, real estate options, and tell you how you can not only protect your cash, make a profit, but also get some cool free bonuses. My name is Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. We help wealthy clients legally reduce their taxes, protect their assets, and have a plan B all around the world. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. If you have $1 million or more, we'd love to help you. If not, we'd love to welcome you to Nomad Capitalist Live, our annual event. Let's start with the euro. This is the one that's perhaps most talked about. These aren't my numbers, by the way, so this is not investment advice, but these are what various analysts that I've read have suggested. The euro spiked with the tariff wars up to about 1.13, 1.14. Some analysts say it stays there, so not much profit potential there. Others say it could go as high as 1.3 euros to the dollar. So you've got an upside in the teens in that case. This is one of the easier currencies to get exposure to if you think there's going to be growth. You can open bank accounts all around the world and you can be able to hold euros, whether it's a very fancy bank account in Liechtenstein, which you might hold in a trust or potentially in your own name, or whether you go to a bank where you can just put in a small amount of money. We've talked about the country of Georgia for years. You go to TBC, you go to Bank of Georgia, you can open a bank account with a very, very, very small deposit, and you can hold US dollars, euros, British pounds, as well as their own currency. Generally speaking, you're not just going to turn up in Paris and open a bank account. Most European countries have very strict rules about who can open bank accounts. And if you don't live there, they're not going to let you do that. Or if you don't own a property, they're not going to let you do that. But there's banks all around the world, particularly in Eastern Europe, as well as banks like in Asia, in Singapore, you can hold euros. So pretty easy one to get exposure to if you just want to hold the currency. Yields on the euro are certainly lower than the dollar, so you've got to expect that you're going to get greater than a 3% appreciation rate to cover the delta on the yield gap. However, holding accounts in euros in some of those emerging markets, you may be able to earn higher rates of return than you would in Singapore, for example. Now, you can also own equities. Your brokerage in your country may allow you to do this. For example, Interactive Brokers in the United States, you can hold stocks in Europe, and you can change in and out of dollars and euros very, very cheaply, even more cheaply than services like Wise. I don't like the asset protection of that. To me, if you're going to invest in stuff overseas, get a brokerage account overseas. But there's plenty of brokerage accounts all around the world. Some of the European ones, like in Switzerland, like in Denmark, they will open an account for you after rigorous due diligence. Again, Singapore, whether it's through a bank or a brokerage account, all kinds of brokerage accounts around the world let you buy European stocks. What I like about certain European stocks, like in France, for example, higher dividend yields. And so if you're looking for income, it's harder to get income in the equity market in the United States right now. The yields are just to the floor. Compare JP Morgan Chase, you've got a yield of, I think, under 2%. Compare that to BNP Paribas in France. Stock has done relatively well. It's going to pay a much higher yield. And so, therefore, you're getting a higher yield, which you don't get in the cash. You're getting exposure to the euro. And potentially, the European stock market this year to date has outperformed the U.S. Real estate. A lot of folks want to buy property in Europe. Obviously, that's not something you can get in and out of in any day. But here's what you can get from it. In certain European countries, we've talked about golden visas. You can get residence by investment, which then gives you the option to live there. I was meeting with a very wealthy guy a couple of years ago. He invited me to his home in Italy. And he says, we bought this home and we didn't realize as Americans we couldn't just come and live here whenever we wanted to. And so there are options that allow you to live in Europe whenever you want to. One of the options is making a real estate investment. Another option in Greece is just putting money in the bank. And so if you're going to be diversifying into bank accounts in euros to any serious level, if you want to buy property from a lifestyle perspective, why not get a benefit of a residence permit in a country like Portugal, in a country like Greece? Other countries you can buy property and get residence as well. There are countries outside of the Eurozone, like in Serbia, for example, where even though they have their own currency, property is generally sold in euros. And so effectively you're holding euros, and their currency is essentially pegged to the euro anyway. So if you're going to put your money into these things, why not get a golden visa to live in a European country? And now you can travel freely whenever you want through that region. You've got a backup place to live, and you're moving your money out of dollars or whatever currency you're in into one that may appreciate more, as well as you're enjoying the lifestyle. Another currency, the British pound, really got beaten up not so long ago. This is a country where we see a lot of clients coming and saying, get me the hell out of here. The UK is going not so well. However, after hitting fresh lows not so long ago, one analyst says the pound could go up substantially to as much as 1.45 to the dollar. Now, again, I'm not saying this is my opinion. That does seem a little heavy, quite frankly. I remember when the pound was 2-1 and all the tourists were coming to Vegas. That was almost 20 years ago. This one's harder to get into. The Georgian banks do offer access to British pounds. You're likely not going to get in a bank account in the UK. I have no idea who these UK private banks take as clients. They don't want EU tax residents. They don't want emerging markets. They don't want Americans. I don't know who their clientele are, all these UK private banks, but you're going to have to go overseas. Smaller amounts in Georgia, Singapore, Hong Kong are going to let you hold British pounds. The rates on pounds in Singapore are pretty good right now. You could also get this through offshore banks in places like the Bahamas, the Cayman Islands. That's going to be tougher. Potentially, you could also move to, and therefore have an easier time getting a bank account in a place like Jersey, for example. And the banks there will let you hold British pounds. Plenty of tax-friendly places to live, no longer the UK itself. Jersey, Guernsey, the tiny Isle of Sark, Gibraltar, all very tax-friendly places if you're looking for a small, secluded place to move to on the European time zone. You can then get a bank account that you can then hold British pounds. I wouldn't do that to hold the British pounds. I just go and open a bank account in Georgia. But if you could put the two together, you can do that. Equities, however, Bank of Georgia, TBC, both trade on the London Stock Exchange. And so while their exposure is largely in their currency, the Georgian lari, the stock itself is in British pounds. And so if you figure it will go up on its own based on the bank's performance, potentially. And if you figure, hey, potentially the stock could go up based on the bank's performance, but the kicker could be maybe the pound is worth more, you could play that. I've told you recently that as I am getting rid of U.S. stocks, Altria was a stock that I owned, the tobacco business. And I said, okay, well, in the British market, I can buy similar companies that are more globally diversified, and they're in the pound, so I'm hedging against potential losses in the U.S. dollar. Again, my investment goals are probably very different from yours, so do your own research on any of these stocks. Private banks around the world, whether it's Andorra, Singapore, the Bahamas, will offer you Swiss francs, albeit often at lower rates. This one is a tougher one to access. You could buy Swiss equities. There's certainly some with a higher dividend tax rate than the U.S. Let's talk about emerging markets. I lived in Malaysia for a long time. We host our annual event, Nomad Capitalist Live, in Malaysia, the Malaysian Ringgit. When I first went there many, many years ago, it was barely over 3 to the dollar. It got down to as low as 4.8 to the dollar. And so people who came to our past Nomad Capitalist Lives got an incredible value in an incredibly affordable place. They get even more bang for their buck. And now one analyst says it could go as high as 3.6. It's already up from some of its lows. 3.6, again, some of these numbers sound a little bit aggressive. But if you come to Nomad Capitalist Live, we have one of my bankers coming. You can open an account. You just put your cash there. You're not going to really earn much more yield than you would on dollars, but you can get a residence permit through the MM2H program, and now you can live in a very tax-friendly country that's incredibly affordable, and that's probably much different from where you live, and yet I think much more enjoyable to live in than the West. You can buy real estate there. It's probably not going to go up, and so you're losing the appreciation potential. I think it'll still take a number of years for the oversupply to be corrected, but it's incredibly affordable real estate. And so from a lifestyle perspective, if you're going to buy property in Europe, for a golden visa, you might spend $8,000 or $10,000 a meter or more. In Malaysia, you can easily spend under $2,000 per square meter and get exposure to the currency. And so the value of that asset could go up. If you have a bank account, there are equities. I've seen very few brokerage accounts outside of Malaysia that let you hold Malaysian equities. They have not been the best performing. And so that's probably not the way to go. But I think Malaysia is a great lifestyle play. Residence permit, maybe a property, and benefit from the appreciation of that currency. I think Southeast Asia has a bright future. In India, analysts predicting mild growth in their rupee. And so that's not one that people are generally looking to diversify into. But I'll tell you, the Indian stock market has done pretty well. And so that might be something to look into. Also, we've talked for years about the Armenian dram. It went from, when I was talking about it for the first time, over 500 the dollar, and you could earn 10% interest in the bank, down to now between 350 and 380. Some analysts say it could go down to as low as 330. And so this is one of those places where you can go and open a bank account. You can get access to different currencies. You can hold dollars. You can hold euros. You can hold rubles. I think a couple of the banks might have British pounds. You can also hold their Armenian dram, which is the one they're saying could continue to strengthen. And in the meantime, you're going to earn 8, 9, 10% interest. You can also buy bonds. And some of these things you can do, you can actually get a residence permit. And that's not nearly as useful as a golden visa that you can travel all over Europe or potentially even living in tax-friendly Malaysia. But for someone who's really committed to learning about Armenia, it could be a path to citizenship in a couple of years. And so having a residence permit that offers that convertible option while holding a high yield, bank account or bond in a currency that's expected to strengthen further, that could be very interesting. And so I've told you to go out and take advantage of residence and citizenship programs before when they're on sale, when the dollar was strong. It does not appear that's going to be the case for a while. You still need to have a residence permit. You still need to have a second passport. And so at least if you believe some of these analyst numbers, you can still get in and have some profit potential by buying a property, putting money in the bank, buying stocks or bonds, getting that residence or citizenship. That's the kicker. So all the analysts that you see out there talking about foreign currencies, they don't add the kicker that Nomad Capitalist does, which is you could give yourself a lower tax place to live. You could give yourself a backup passport when the world becomes uncertain and the dollar does sink further. You're not stuck in the middle of it. You're not stuck with whatever bad stuff is going to happen when the West continues to decline along with its currencies. I believe you want to be geopolitically diversified. You want to be financially diversified. We help our clients do that. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. We can help you figure out which banks, which brokerage accounts, which place to live for taxes, which passports, which asset protection structures. The reality is your country is not the best at anything in all likelihood, let alone everything. You're going to see that now if you're holding dollars. Again, these are analyst numbers. Do your own research. I'm not telling you to buy any of these currencies, but I am telling you to look at your options because the dollar is heading in the wrong direction.